Hey, Sav.
Hey, Shay, and bonjour, brand connoisseurs. Welcome to the Art of Branding podcast on the Team SCG podcast network. So, Shay, rate your day with minimal context.
6.5.
6.5. Okay,
No
pretty
context.
strong. No context needed.
What about you?
I would say a nice 8.9.
Whoa.
I know. You
Okay.
wouldn't think that there's a hurricane out and about.
I was going to say, okay, at least one of us can bring the juice.
Exactly. I'll bring the juice. But we have a really exciting elephant in the room today. So, Shay, what do you think the elephant in the room is?
It's the obvious fact of when your family dives literally into your business. Literally, all of the things.
All interpretations of it. So, without further ado, let's introduce your uncle, the great David Greenberger. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, Dave.
Hey.
How you doing?
Okay.
Rate your day with minimal context, Dave.
7.5.
Strong.
It's more than I was going to guess.
He's coming here to play.
So for some context for everybody, we have literal polar opposites. So we had our episode with Barry, who is the extrovert of the family. And now we have our episode with Dave, who is his polar opposite and somewhat of the introvert of the family. So I'm really excited to get to pull some stuff out of him and get to hear his story because he won't share it just
willy-nilly.
Yeah,
exactly.
We have to pull this
Dave's pumped to be here. He's currently our CFO, and you and Barry started this company back in the day. Yes, 88. It was a good year. And as you know, you all met Barry last week. Very extroverted, sales driven. Dave over here is our analytical king that runs numbers and crunches numbers in his sleep and
make sure there's money in the bank.
Yeah, keeps us between the lines, and that's kind of always been your dynamic. So Dave, take us from the top, not necessarily of like how you even got into this business per se, but like where did you start professionally? Tell us about it. A young spry Dave.
In high school, I was part of a group called Future Business Leaders of America in high school, and one of the requirements was to get a job. So I got a job at American Bank of Hollywood.
Were you just interested? Like it's almost, I guess, like debate club or something.
Well, like a DECA.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And I think that there was FBLA even in my high school, but we had DECA as well, which was very like business driven. You had to go out and find like an internship, something that was like relevant to the business field and whatnot. But so, I mean, it's cool that you were able to do that.
It just interested you like from the get-go?
What about it in particular did you find super interesting?
Money, banking. Sounded cool.
So were you like money motivated at a really young age? I mean, you started, you would say so?
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed working. I like making money. I wanted to pay my own way, so to speak, and be responsible for myself.
You're the youngest.
Youngest of four.
So that's also interesting.
Speak to the birth order.
I was going to say that's also interesting because usually the youngest, at least in my sense, is like leans on everybody else to take care of me. Like, you know, I go out to lunch with my brother. There's no way I have my wallet. So like
you're a unique case in general.
So I find it interesting that like you being the youngest, and it's just the way I grew up, but you were always the caretaker. You were always the one that was looking out for everybody else. It wasn't what you would think would be the natural kind of other way around, that everyone's looking out for your finances. It was more you live, breathe, and eat and spoke this language that I would say a lot of our other family did not inherit.
I would be inclined to agree with that.
So it was lucky stroke on our end that you actually did. But the banking job, did that just kind of open those doors to you that you understand the way, you know, the stock market works, money works, all those things? And
no, I mean, back then it was just a job. It was working as a teller, and I just loved counting money. I loved being around it. I mean, I was 16 years old, and on a given day, I'd be responsible for, I don't know, anywhere between $300,000 and $500,000.
That's crazy.
And,
wow.
You know, just being accurate, and it was just important to me.
So how does it progress from there? How do you get into, you know, you start young in the banking, whatever, but how do you get into the fact that you want to move in, you know, to eventually you're going to be owning your own business and be responsible for the finances of the entire company?
I transitioned from there. One of my business customers offered me a job to go into sales, and I was always fascinated by sales. And so I went to work with him and traveled the state of Florida and did outside sales. And I just loved being around and the conquest of selling, I guess, and being around people.
So what exactly were you selling?
At the time, I was selling high-end furniture to the interior design trade.
So where does it go from there?
Where does it go from there? I worked with that for 7 years. And then, unfortunately, he got sick and decided to close the business. And so even though we started SCG in 1988 collectively, I didn't actually come in and start working full-time until 91.
And right away you started on the finance side? Like that's just
Well, that
what
was
you...
my first focal, was just to make sure the finances were in order and then directionally help how we sold, how we bought. It was more intriguing to me from a numbers perspective, that you can make as much money on your purchasing as you could on your sales.
So basically, like, as far as, you set the foundation for SCG in many which ways, but like financially in the early days. But then
It was different back then. I mean, when we were growing the business, it was more about sustainability and what we were going to do to evolve and grow. And it was more about being responsible to the company or we used to jokingly say, you're responsible with the checkbook.
Yeah.
And you had to generate X amount of dollars of gross profit in order to support the entity.
You were living, like a day to day with that, right?
Oh,
And
yeah, it was a constant. It was a struggle because it was, you create your budget and your fixed obligations, and then you adjust your sales goals, I guess, and targets, and then you just do whatever you have to achieve them.
At some point, though, you were floating with what you could or couldn't do. This is on a credit card. We have 30 days before this gets paid, or this is due as of 7 days, so we can't do this instead of that. So what was that scary for you? Just trying to figure out how much money you had for the day?
Yeah, it was a constant balancing act. And then, because I never wanted to take on debt. And then finally I was like, you know what, this is stupid. Borrow a little bit of money, pay a little bit of interest, and sleep better at night.
By nature, you're more of a risk averse mind, correct?
Yes.
And so, like, making that transition of assuming debt, of
in a room full of risk,
yeah, exactly. You're the most risk adverse in a room full of very risk oriented people. So you're the one that, like, everybody wants to move forward and move quickly. You're pumping the brakes with like, the voice of reason.
Right.
Exactly.
Have you thought of this? Have you thought of that?
Yeah.
What if this happens? What if that happens? And I got to say, like, a lot of times from the other side of the chair, we're only focused on the gas pedal and how to get there. Mm-hmm. He has this magnifying glass of trying to see all the road bumps that are coming up ahead of us that I think we all agree that we can get past them. But I think part of his struggle and also like his role is the fact that we don't see it the way he sees it.
Yeah.
And that's a really isolating chair to be in because, he's responsible for making sure that there's money in the bank to pay the suppliers and, do all the things that we want to do from a day-to-day perspective. And we're kind of coming at it from like, hey, I don't know what you got to do to get us there, but this is what we want and what we need. Let me know.
There was a period of time that, once you have your fixed obligations, those don't go away ever. Mm-hmm. There was could be a period of 2 or 3 months that we didn't take paychecks.
Yeah.
To ensure
that
we paid the rent and we paid the suppliers. We never wanted to ever fall behind. One of the things I was going to tell you is that, back as we were growing, it was good for us that all of the supply chain thought that we were 5 times the size that we were. And we never let on. We never shared anything with anybody. From a private perspective, we didn't share sales figures. We didn't share gross profit. We didn't share anything with anybody. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, whether it be a fault or whatever, even with each other, because if there was an abundance, somebody would try to spend it before it actually came in, sort of like the new generation does. They see it on a budget, and you have X amount of dollars on the budget, and let's go shopping.
But you mentioned, before you were trying to, keep all this together because you were doing it in the name of your family. Can you speak to the fact of like how it was, going from an industry of working in a bank to then, selling high-end furniture to then working with your family? Like, how has that transition?
I mean, my dad, we would always have like it wasn't a board meeting, but we called it a board meeting. And we would sit and go have dinner and have a meeting about what was going on and strategize and how are we going to sell and how are we going
Did
to.
he get the final say?
We talked things out collectively. So I don't know that it wasn't like a one person. It was like we talked out the directionality and
What if there was a disagreement?
we worked through it.
So was it interesting kind of going from the dynamic shift of like having your parents be your parents and reporting to your parents like their child to then we're operating a business together as a family, and now you're in a chair where you have a very specific role, your brother is in a chair that he has a very specific role, and then your parents are there as well.
Honestly, I felt like it was just a blessing. I think that we were to be able to be with everybody all the time and do it together and for each other. That's what it was all about.
So something that's really interesting here and that we haven't even really delved into would be your relationship with Adam. Can you walk us through how you two came to be, and where you're at now? Because that's a very, very interesting piece of your story, but
It's a
also
bad day for that. Adam pissed him off this morning.
but also SCG as a whole, like you guys have a very, very special relationship, and it's may not be the most special today, but
Can you speak to it as of yesterday?
yeah,
It's always special.
of course. Take it from the top.
In 1988, coincidentally, the same year that
SCG
we
was
started
born.
SCG,
Matched in.
Big Brothers Big Sisters, and it was an active match for 2 years before he moved away to the north part of the state and stayed connected. And speed up version, and when he was 18, he decided to come back and live with us, and went back to high school.
So how many years is that as you guys were matched already before he came back to live with you?
10.
10 years. Okay.
We were together. Came back and lived with us, went back to high school, got his GED, went to college, had some challenges, decided to go away for a little while. Fast forward, came back 6 years later, came to work at SCG and has been here ever since.
What's that dynamic like for you that would be the first, I guess, in my opinion, second generation coming in almost. So what was that like for you getting the footing of that family dynamic?
To me, again, it's all about family. So whatever it takes.
But at this point, I mean, obviously he's come to live with you. You guys have, spent really, quality time together. You guys have a relationship that has evolved from just being quote unquote big brothers, little brothers to actual family. And now, I mean, you literally spend every day together at the office, and you guys, whenever anybody needs something, it's, call Adam and he'll figure it out. He's become a big fix-it guy for the family. And so
there's nothing he can't do.
Mm-hmm.
Might take him 2 or 3 tries, but he could get it done.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
When he came into the company, originally started out just doing whatever needed getting done and was intrigued by sales and started selling. And I want to say probably wasn't the first year, but his second full year selling, sold over $1 million. So he loved the challenge and the hunt, and same thing. He was everybody's best friend. His clients loved him, and
he became one of our most successful sales reps. The most successful sales rep
at the time. Yeah.
It's a really interesting dynamic. I'm excited for everyone to get to hear about his story too. But to kind of like close the loop with you, what would you say was the, I guess, high and the low of the journey so far?
I would imagine the high is probably now where we are in this explosive growth. It's just from the high is like the most exciting time of what's going on. It's also some of the scariest times just because of the unknowns and the things that we're putting out in the universe.
Yeah.
And how expensive everything is.
It is. It's crazy.
What you guys are doing.
Well,
but
talk
it's
about
also
that.
Exciting to see.
Talk about that really quick from like a rent perspective. I mean, we went from, and I'm not going to make you call out dollar value, but we went from X to what, triple, quadruple, 5 times a month? What is it?
From where we were literally 3 years ago to where we'll be January of next year, it'll be 10 times.
So like from a finance person who, I think that was part of our struggle, is like, I looked at our success as this step and then next step and then next step. And you had a fear of like, okay, just because we did this now doesn't mean that it's guaranteed to continue year over year over year. So like all the things that I would push for, we need a bigger warehouse, we need more trucks, we need more people, we need more equipment, all these things. It had to be terrifying for you, because here I am promising the world, put me in a 40,000 square foot building and we'll fill it up. It's, on one hand, like, I'm sure you would have loved to just believe me and, say like, yeah, she said we're going to do it, so we're going to do it. But on the other hand, there has to be this other part of you that's like, okay, well, what if they don't? Now what?
I could live in a van down by the river.
That was the plan. That was the plan. But would you say like it started to at least level out for you a little bit?
What do you mean level out?
Your fear, your overall anxiety when
No,
you come
because
into work every day.
We still haven't experienced that yet, So yes, we've put it out there in the universe, but the expenses are mushrooming from a fixed perspective, where the revenue is growing, but it's also growing from a responsibility perspective. From finance, you're bringing on tremendous amount more sales, which brings on more receivables, which brings on more inventory. Which also, one of my quotes that you remember is, you can't spend receivables and you can't spend inventory. And you can't pay your bills with those two things.
That took me like 5 years to understand and digest.
That's a golden nugget, David.
Honest to God, to me, I could not understand it. I'd come into his office and he'd be like, we have no money. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Just had the best month we've ever had.
I was like, we have sold more collectively this year than we sold in the last 4 years combined. Like, what do you mean we have no money? And he literally had to sit me down and say, let me explain this to you. Let me dumb this down for you. Okay. You buy something, we have to pay for it today, and we don't get paid for another 90 to 120 days. He's like, do I need to do it?
Let me teach you cash flow.
I know. So it was really it was a tough conversation, because here I am, I'm being like, you're wrong. Like, your math is incorrect.
Here I am, selling.
I was like, you told me to sell and that everything else would be fine.
No, actually, you told me your math worked great for a $7 million company, but it's not so good at a $20 million company. And the reality is, it's literally 3 times harder at 20 million than it is at 7 million. So the math is the same.
I didn't like or appreciate the math.
Exponential.
Of course, when the math doesn't work for you, then it just doesn't work.
And it was a tough time between us, because, this is, we've talked about this a couple times, but when you're experiencing success at the rate that we experienced it, with the lack of our ability to build the foundation behind it, it's invigorating and terrifying at the same time. But from a family perspective, that's what we were feeling. We were feeling this literal like line in the sand of my sales brain, Josh's sales brain, and even my dad's sales brain was like, how are you not excited about this? Like, how are you literally finding anything negative to say about the fact that we sold 20 million plus last year? And you're like, it's great. Who's going to pay for it? And it was this like double, sided argument that it felt like we were going in circles for a really long time, and we didn't know what came first.
Pay for it. It's how are you going to beat the customers over the head that don't pay when they say they're going to pay?
But even if everybody paid exactly when they said they were going to pay, we were selling too quickly. The growth was unsustainable from the way our life cycle.
Purchasing of the inventory for the length of time, instead of buying, from an inventory management perspective, you're not buying a 3-month cycle. We were buying a 1-year cycle. So you're buying something today,
which was because we didn't have the ability or understanding of what actual inventory management and consumption looks like.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, we were just dealing with net 30 terms.
We knew we couldn't run out.
A day.
That was our only rule.
And then
from a finance perspective, you're buying and inventorying something today that you're not going to deliver for 11 months.
Mm-hmm.
on the outside, the end of the project. And then from that delivery, you're not going to get paid for 90 days after that.
Mm-hmm.
So your cash flow, you're paying for something in January of 24 that's not going to be completed until April of 25.
To finish us up though, can you just speak to like two sides of this? Anybody who is thinking about entering, an entrepreneurial or business journey, and kind of what you would say, like you learned the most on what it takes to be financially successful on that side. And then also on the family aspect, like how, that's nicely put, but like, how do you stay sane with it all? Especially because a lot of times you are the only person that is looking at this side of our business. The rest of us are looking at all the opportunity that could potentially come in.
I guess first on the family side, you just try to have an even keel as best as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Try to communicate better, which we can all learn to communicate better.
Amen.
As you know, we've had our communication challenges.
No.
Once emotion comes into play, all logic goes out the window. So try and approach things more from a logical perspective.
That's more deep than anyone's going to give it credit, but I think that's been our saving grace a few times, and also our not so saving grace. Our emotional conversations usually don't go well.
Yet here we are.
What about just entering into the business journey?
I would recommend it to anybody. I mean, it's what America's all about.
Do you have one secret that you would say played to your success from the financial standpoint? I mean, you've had a really great track record of keeping a business financially healthy, even with all of the, growth spurts and
Make more, spend
downfalls.
less.
That's it.
That's it. We're done and cut.
Make more, spend less.
That's David Greenberger in a
I know.
nutshell.
And literally.
I mean, it's just
put that
try
on his
it.
tombstone.
What's that?
Put that on your tombstone.
Great, thanks. And I mean, I don't know where I learned it originally, probably from my dad, that, you don't tell me how much you made, tell me how much you saved. Don't spend more than you make. People get on this, they got to have it and they got to have it and they got to have it. And here's my credit card, whip it out. And you can never get caught up with that credit card debt. And I guess probably from a financial stability perspective, because I love numbers, if you take care of yourself first, it's like that thing on the airlines when you get on a plane. If the oxygen mask falls, put it on your face first, and then you could help others. If you don't take care of yourself first, you can't help anybody. And so that was like my own personal mantra that, make sure that your own finances are taken care of, and then you could always have something, that help others.
I appreciate it. I realize that a lot of times it has to feel isolating for you because you are the only one who has this. It's a gift. Honestly, it's a strength that the rest of us just are not as literate when it comes to financial success. And I would say that that's what makes a lot of our business actually work though, because we each here have a lane. But I think the key is to respect each other for their strengths and their lanes. Mm-hmm. And that's something that took our family a lot of time to work out because, during our tumultuous period, he had to say to us, do you trust me? Yes or no? If you guys don't trust me, then what am I doing here? And that was kind of a hard pill for us to swallow because at the end of the day, he is the best bet to get us where we need to go from a financial standpoint. And, it had to be hard on you too, not having someone have the interest in learning it the way you saw everybody else have interest in every other part of our business. And no one was raising their hand saying, show me the P&L for the month. That was my nightmare for as long as I can remember. And it had to be tough on you. So I appreciate you sticking through it. And I appreciate you making us go to Friday night dinner, even when we wanted to kill each other. And hopefully onward and upward from here, and we won't make you work as hard in the future.
But we greatly appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast because
we know it's not your thing.
It's not your thing, but there is a very deep story to tell about David Greenberger, and we appreciate you deeply here. And I'm sure everybody listening will have so many golden nuggets to take away. So we'll definitely have to have you on another time, and just honestly, we can dive straight into financial tips if we can have you some other time. But we loved having you on, and we'll definitely have to have you on again.
Yep. So with that, I think that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
So au revoir, brand connoisseurs. If you liked this episode, like, subscribe, follow along with our journey, and we will see you next Monday.
Bye-bye.